About a year after I began, my schedule had become pretty much nocturnal. I'd usually leave home around sunset and stay out delivering till well after midnight. Those hours were quieter, and sometimes the payouts would be better, so I didn't mind. This story begins when I accepted a delivery close to 1 a.m. It came in for a small bag of groceries from an all-night convenience shop. It stood out to me because it's not usual for someone to place a grocery order that late, but I grabbed it, not thinking much of it. Outside, I pulled up to a mostly deserted gas station. There was only one old cashier on duty, a friendly guy who handed me the order with a smile. Since I was feeling tired, I got myself a small coffee, thanked him, and stepped back out into the quiet night. I could hear the faint buzz of overhead lights and my shoes on the concrete as I crossed the empty parking lot. As soon as I hit the main stretch of road, I noticed another car close behind me. At this hour, seeing any traffic is rare, so I tried to remember if I'd noticed another vehicle when I pulled in, but nothing came to mind. Maybe it was parked on the far side of the station or pulled out just after me. Still, I watched the headlights in my rearview mirror, feeling a little uneasy. The rest of the trip took me down a long, empty road heading toward the outskirts of town, with trees and shadows pinching the narrow two-lane. It was that kind of silence where every tiny sound feels loud, the hum of my engine, the soft thud when I hit bumps, even the rustle of takeout bags shifting in the back seat. Then something shifted. The ride suddenly got rough, and a new sound joined the night, a harsh scraping from the right side of my car. At first, I thought it was just construction or debris on the road, but within a minute, my car was rattling like it might fall apart. With no choice, I eased onto the shoulder, both sides of the road swallowed by thick woods. Those headlights pulled in behind me, stopping a few car lengths back. For a split second, it crossed my mind that maybe they'd stopped to check on me. I stepped out, more out of necessity than curiosity, breathing in chilly air that smelled like pine needles and old pavement. Rounding my car, I saw the source of the trouble right away, a totally flat front tire. The shredded side made it obvious this wasn't your regular slow leak. Something had slashed it badly. I ran my hand along the rubber, feeling a deep slice that couldn't have happened at random. In the quiet night, the crunch of gravel made me look up. A man was getting out of the car behind me. He waved, trying to put me at ease, but there was something strange in the way he moved, like he already expected me to be anxious. He got closer, and the headlights behind him made the grime and stains on his faded jeans and dark sweatshirt even more noticeable. His hair was gray, wild, and he had a heavy beard, both longer than most people keep. Even before he spoke, I could feel tension gathering in my chest. "Need some help?" he called, giving me a big grin. I shook my head, doing my best to look calm. "No, thank you," I called back, not really wanting to start a conversation. He didn't seem to mind. He just took another step closer, eyes flicking from my ruined tire to me, still smiling. Awkward silence hung between us. I tried to keep my voice firm, telling him a friend was on the way to help, but his grin faded. He stared a moment longer, then shifted, probably hoping I'd change my mind. The air between us felt heavy, and each second felt slower. With no plan except to get distance, I suddenly decided to move. There was an opening in the trees, and I darted off the shoulder, branches whipping against my jacket as I vanished into the woods. I could hear him following at first, branches crackling under hurried steps, not far behind. But after what felt like a short sprint, his footsteps faded. Kneeling down, I watched from the darkness, my heart pounding and my breath caught in my throat. I waited, eyes scanning the space between his car and mine. He wandered back and forth in the beam of his own headlights, searching, it seemed, for any sign of me. After some time, he seemed to give up. He got back in his car, the engine turning over with a cough, and eventually disappeared into the night. I didn't move for a long time, partly out of fear, partly to be sure he was really gone. My car was close, but those minutes watching from the brush felt surreal, a mix of nerves and alertness I've never really shaken. When I was certain the road was clear, I edged out of the woods, carefully checking around before making my way back to my car. My stomach dropped, seeing what was missing, the delivery bag and a few things from inside my car. No real damage except the tire, but it left me rattled, thinking about what might have happened if I'd trusted that man for even another minute. The order in the app traced right back to a customer's real name and information. Apparently, this person hadn't tried to hide who they were, and from what I heard, the police didn't find enough reason for a serious charge, since nothing major had happened. Even so, I stopped delivering late at night after that. Sometimes, when I drive past dark stretches or see a pair of headlights in my mirror a little too long, the memory comes back. That strange, tense night is always with me, a reminder that even in ordinary jobs, you can cross paths with someone who has other plans. Years have passed since then, and the details don't fade. A lost tire and a stolen bag are small things. The hollow quiet of those woods and the way the man's smile vanished, those are things you keep with you. I don't deliver at night anymore, and I always remind people, trust your gut, even if you can't explain what's wrong. It might just be the thing that keeps you safe.
Working as a food delivery driver late at night was my way to make some extra cash. Most weekends, Friday and Saturday nights were the busiest. That's when people usually stay in or hang out with friends and order food, so I picked those nights to work. One Saturday, just after 1 a.m., I got an order for McDonald's from a guy named Kyle. He lived pretty close to where I was at the time, so I figured it'd be a quick run. I punched in the nearest McDonald's to pick up his order. It was a small one, just 2 hamburgers, not much to carry. Kyle's house was only about 5 to 7 minutes away from there. I followed the delivery app's directions, which took me to a short, dead-end street. That street actually came off another dead-end street, making it feel even more isolated. His house was the last one on the road and sat right up against a line of trees beside a highway. Since it was late, the whole area was quiet and pretty much empty. I didn't want to ring the doorbell and possibly wake everyone up if it wasn't necessary, so I decided to call Kyle's phone number, hoping he'd answer. It rang just once before going to voicemail. Weird. I hung up, confused. But then, not long after, I got a text from Kyle telling me to just come to the door. No explanation, just that simple. I walked up to the big wooden porch at the front of the house. The boards were weathered and cracked, and the place looked old from outside. The front door opened, and standing there was a bald man. He wasn't very old, probably in his 30s, but his head was completely shaved. I always wondered if it was from illness or if it was just his style, but I didn't judge. His breath hit me the moment he spoke, and it was awful, really foul, like he'd been drinking or worse. The man seemed pretty drunk and off, making the whole thing a little uncomfortable. Thankfully, I didn't have to wait for payment since the app handled that automatically, but Kyle asked me to come put the food on his kitchen table while he ran downstairs to grab a tip. At first I hesitated, thinking it was strange to go inside, But a free tip was a free tip, so I followed him in. The kitchen was barely lit. The only light was a tiny nightlight plugged into an outlet, barely bright enough to see by. The air was thick with a nasty smell I couldn't quite place. It wasn't the usual kind of bad smell. It was deep, sour, and heavy, like something rotten had been sitting there for days. I looked around, discomfort growing, but Kyle was already heading down the basement stairs to find my tip. I waited, trying to keep calm, but the silence started eating at me. I decided to step into the living room next to the kitchen, hoping to distract myself. The TV was on, which was the only thing lighting the room. The funny thing was, even with the TV on, the room felt dark and eerie. The smell was worse in here, stronger and more overwhelming. My eyes caught the sliding door that led to the back deck. That door was open halfway, even though it was cold outside. I figured maybe he'd left it like that to air out whatever was making the horrible smell. I moved toward it, desperate to get a breath of fresh air. When I stepped outside onto the deck, I immediately heard the buzzing of flies. It was loud and thick near the door. My eyes adjusted to the darkness, and suddenly a motion sensor light flicked on, shining bright on two large black garbage bags placed by the railing. The bags were bulging and looked heavy, the sheets inside long and stiff. The smell here hit me full force, worse than anything inside. It took me a moment, but then I realized what I might be looking at. My heart started pounding hard. Something was very wrong. Waiting for a tip or standing around was suddenly the last thing I wanted to do. I turned back inside as fast as I could. That's when Kyle came stomping up from the basement, holding a few crumpled dollars in his hand. He saw me moving toward the door and asked me where I was going. I made up an excuse about checking for something in my car, but my mind was racing to get out of there. Kyle came close and handed me the money. But then his eyes flicked to the open back door and the still glowing light outside. When he looked at me, his smile disappeared. His voice got firmer as he asked me if I had been outside on the deck. I said no, and I tried to sound calm, but all I felt was fear. He just stared, not saying a word, like he was deciding what to do. That stare did not feel like the look of a friendly tip giver. I stopped caring about being polite. Opening the door, I started walking out. Right as I stepped outside, Kyle suddenly grabbed my shoulder. I didn't hesitate. I yanked my arm free and sprinted straight to my car. I looked back just in time to see him disappear inside, the front door still swinging wide open behind him. I locked the car doors and turned the ignition. For a few seconds, I kept watching his porch through the windshield. Then, out of nowhere, Kyle burst out of the house, running full speed toward me. He had a big metal rod or pipe in his hand, waving it like he meant business. I didn't stick around to see what he was planning. I backed away fast and pulled out onto the road, already dialing 911 as I was driving. I found a spot down the block, parked, and waited. Within moments, police cars raced past me, heading straight to Kyle's house. I stayed on the phone, telling the dispatcher everything I'd seen. I watched as officers arrived, and I saw them begin moving those large black bags from the deck area towards the edge of the yard. Police later told me that those bags had contained dead bodies. The smell, the flies, the stiff shapes I'd seen, they all made sense now. Kyle wasn't just some creepy guy, he was dangerous. I've delivered food to plenty of strange places before, but that night stuck with me like nothing else. After that, I never stepped inside anyone's house, no matter what they said or promised. Sometimes safety means listening to those uneasy feelings and not pushing your luck. Late nights on the road can be quiet and easy, or they can turn into something you never expected. That night taught me that your gut is your best guide. No tip or delivery is worth risking your safety.
I was working at a quiet local place, a little out of the way, with one of the managers keeping an eye on things as closing time got near. That night, my boss handed me a handwritten slip with an address and a phone number for a couple of pizzas, my last order of the night. Back then, things were a bit different. My phone could barely send a text, and GPS wasn't something you could count on unless you owned a special device. I relied on an old road atlas, flipping through pages and tracing routes with my finger, which always made things a bit stressful, especially in unfamiliar towns. The address was for a spot on a road called something like Maple Hollow, but I couldn't say for sure now. All I remember was how difficult it was to find in the darkness. There weren't any street lights, and the road seemed to twist through endless woods and open fields. Sometimes I'd pull over, turn on the dome light, and scan the map again, frustration building every time nothing seemed to match. After what felt like ages driving in circles, I decided to call the number I'd been given. The phone rang over and over without an answer. Finally, someone picked up, but no one spoke first. So I did, introducing myself and explaining I was trying to deliver their pizzas. The voice that finally replied was so low and quiet, it was hard to tell if it was a man or woman at first. I asked for help finding the driveway. They spoke very slowly, describing a dirt path that was easy to miss. I listened carefully, following their directions until I finally spotted the turnoff and eased up a narrow track, passing trees so close to the car they practically brushed against the windows. The drive up to the house took a minute or so. I eased the car to a stop beside an old pickup truck. The lights from inside spilled out through a window, an orange glow just barely lighting the porch. I grabbed the pizzas, stepped through the crunchy gravel toward the door, and looked for a doorbell. There wasn't one, so I knocked. Music drifted through the walls, muffled and old, like something you'd hear in a black and white movie. Footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. After a long pause, the door cracked open. Just one eye peeked through the gap. I gave a careful smile and said I was the pizza delivery, hoping they'd open up the rest of the way. The person, voice as slow and quiet as on the phone, confirmed the order, but made no move to open the door wider. It got awkward, so I asked if they had the cash. They said they'd go get it and shuffled away, disappearing deeper into the house. As I waited, I took in little details through the small opening. Floors covered in sheet metal, faded furniture that looked positively ancient, and the unmistakable twang of a dusty old record player spinning in a far corner. The whole house smelled wrong. Not dirty, but sour and thick, the kind of scent you can't ignore even when you wish you could. Several minutes passed. I waited for the customer to reappear, but nothing happened. The door, left half open, creaked wider on its own, showing a little more of the tired living room with each second. I hesitated, then knocked on the inside edge, calling out, wanting to move things along. From deeper in the house, the voice replied, gently asking if I would come into the kitchen. I remembered all the warnings from my coworkers. Never walk into someone's home unless you absolutely have to, especially if something feels wrong. I stood where I was and replied, asking for confirmation. The request was repeated, same quiet tone. With nowhere to put the pizzas and no sign of the money, I edged just barely inside the doorway. The floorboards shifted under my weight as if they might break. To one side was a short hallway with doors, to the other an opening to the kitchen. Along the hallway, a strange figure caught my eye. Someone, their back turned, swaying back and forth, arms moving in slow, awkward motions, almost like slow dancing to the music. Even in another setting, I might have found it funny, but this time dread crept in. I turned to the kitchen, finally spotting the same face from the door, watching from behind a wall. This time, only one eye was visible again, tracking me from the shadows. My mind filled with panic. Should I just drop the pizza and leave? I tried to stick to business, asking again about the payment. Instead of answering, the man began chuckling in a low, rattling way unlike anything I'd ever heard. Then out of nowhere, his voice changed, much louder and more forceful. He called out a name, "Randall!" The command echoed through the little house. That was my limit. Without a word, I turned and hurried toward the front door, heart pounding. Out of my corner of eye, I caught the other figure. Instead of dancing, he now stood completely still at the end of the hallway, just staring at me. Not bothering to close the door gently, I jogged back to my car, pizza boxes still in my hands. It wasn't until I was inside, doors locked, and had my engine started, that I noticed the front door of the house was now wide open. I wasted no time backing up, tires bumping through the gravel as I pointed the car back toward the main road. For a few moments, I kept checking my mirrors, half expecting to see someone running out after me, but nothing happened. Once I got a safe distance, I called my boss to explain what happened. He was understanding, and when I got back to the shop, everyone had a laugh at it. To them, it sounded more funny than scary. For me, it was different. The image of that face, always lurking at the edge of the doorway or behind a wall, stuck with me for ages after. From then on, I decided, no matter how rushed or awkward it might make things, I'd never step fully inside a stranger's place while doing deliveries. Some things just aren't worth risking, no matter how many times you tell yourself it's probably nothing.